welcome. Thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me and share a little bit about what you do and kind of what you're about and everything. I know sleep, everybody always has questions about sleep, right?
hmm I get them often.
So tell me, this is kind of our first time meeting, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to do this. So if you don't mind, go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself. Kind of how did you get into this space? How did you start being a sleep consultant? Kind of what drew you to that?
Okay. Well, my name's Tara Hess. I have a business called Tulsa Pediatric Sleep Consulting, and my oldest baby, who is now suddenly 16
Oh
somehow,
gosh.
she was a terrible sleeper. And I had followed this woman. Her name's Kim West. She's known as the sleep lady in the sleep world. And she offered the opportunity to train 50 women across the world to do what she did about, goodness, 13 or 14 years ago. And so I jumped on that opportunity and got trained, and now I've been working with clients all over the world ever since then. But my baby that, slept really bad, she was my worst of my three kids, as far as sleep goes, and she's really the inspiration behind what I do for sure.
That is so cool. Who is it that you kind of typically are working with? Like who seeks you out? Who are you kind of working with most of the time?
Okay. Well, I have families of children from birth to age 10 years old. That's their age range that I'm trained to work with. So it's a pretty broad range, and they come to me for a variety of reasons. I'd say the number one reason is their child just isn't sleeping through the night. Again, whether that's a baby or a 7-year-old, like there's a reason why they're not sleeping through the night. Sometimes it's a medical reason, which I will catch and refer them out to the right person to have that addressed. But most of the time, there's also a behavioral piece to that. And they just really they're tired, they're exhausted, they can't even think straight. They really need someone to kind of take all the guesswork out of it for them and give them a plan to follow. And so they can get their child sleeping well. So again, whether it's not sleeping through the night, or their 3-year-olds having some bedtime battles, or they're not napping well, or they're waking up way too early for the day. I mean, there's a multitude of reasons that parents might work with me.
Man, that's a lot older than I would have expected. I would have thought most of it would have been like toddlers and
Mhm.
babies and stuff.
Yeah, whenever I first started, I was certified from it was 6 months to 6 years was kind of like my tagline, which was easy to remember for people, of course. But believe it or not, I mean, I get probably almost as many 5 and 6-year-olds as I do babies and toddlers. And then after I had been doing this for quite some time, I went ahead and extended my training to age 10. So.
Wow. I don't think people typically think of sleep issues in that older kind of population. Like what do you see kind of typically is that fault there, if you will?
Yeah, so it gets kind of tricky when they get past the age of about 7, because a lot of times there might be like some anxiety involved surrounding sleep or just in general. So again, we have to address that with the right person. But it would be the same things that, if you have an adult who's not sleeping well in that age range, it's probably some of the same issues. Maybe they just don't have really good like sleep hygiene habits, and we want to talk about environment and, screen time and some of that kind of stuff. So
What do you love the most about what you do?
I love being able to help families the way that I was helped. I told you I had followed Kim West, the sleep lady, but she actually was my own personal sleep consultant with my oldest baby, and I just remember how good that felt. Thinking like, and this is what all my families think when they come to me, like they must have like the worst sleeper in the world. And now it's like I hear this every day. I've heard it for 13 years. I promise you, like this is not the worst case. So being able to help them like I was helped is just really priceless.
That's so neat. What
Mhm.
are some kind of common trouble spots that you seem to encounter?
Yeah, so I'd say too late of a bedtime, probably a really big one. not really knowing how to fall asleep independently. So again, it might be a baby who's 6 months old, who either nurses or is rocked or walked or bounced on the ball or takes their bottle or whatever to go to sleep. Or it might be a 6-year-old who someone lays with them and pats their back while they go to sleep. It's some sort of habit most of the time that's causing them to not know how to fall asleep, because sleep isn't it's a learned skill. It's not something we're necessarily born knowing how to do, and it's something we have to kind of let our children learn how to do on them by themselves, because we can't really you can't really teach them how to
Yeah.
sleep, set them up to be successful for that, but ultimately they're going to have to learn how to do that on their own, whether they're 6 months or 6 years or 10 years old. So yeah, just habits at bedtime. And then when they wake up in the middle of the night, they honestly just don't know how to get themselves back to sleep. A schedule being maybe not consistent or inappropriate. A lot of times parents think, maybe if I just keep my baby up, and not let them nap very much today, I'll try to keep them up as much as possible, and then they'll sleep better tonight. But typically the opposite is true, because when they start to get overtired, they have a much more difficult time sleeping at night. So those are really some of the more common things I see.
Gotcha. Looking at that, like being overtired, what are some of the signs or symptoms of being overtired compared to being undertired, maybe? I know that's kind of a hard thing to tease out sometimes.
It really is. I mean, usually if you have a baby who's undertired, to be honest, they don't seem tired yet. I mean, it sounds too simple to be true, but they're still going to be generally happy. They're not going to be fussy. They're still, moving along with their day. Whereas if you get an overtired child, at some point they will hit that point of being fussy, being irritable. But the tricky part is that when children get really overtired, then they get that second wind, which
Mm.
is what a lot of parents refer to it as. And what it basically is like a rush of cortisol, which is our stress hormone that shoots throughout the bloodstream and makes them seem like they're not tired. But what really happens is they were already tired an hour ago when they were kind of fussy. And now, because they didn't go to sleep, they've got that cortisol in their bloodstream, and that makes it really difficult at that point to fall asleep. So again, they'll go through a period when they're overtired where you can tell they're overtired, but if you
Yeah.
too long, they almost seem like they're not tired yet. And so parents often just don't get them down because they think, they're not tired yet. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it can be a little tricky between the undertired, overtired, but I'd say the most basic thing would just be your undertired baby isn't going to seem tired yet, you know. So.
Yeah, I know with my own kid, I have two kids, and my older one, especially, he tends to ramp up if he starts getting really tired. Like he's really can't sit still. Like he's really just move, like he's trying to keep himself awake almost by
Mhm.
not stopping, because he knows if he stops, then he's gonna conk out.
Yeah, there's a lot of kids who get misdiagnosed with ADHD, and really they often just have an underlying sleep disorder that hasn't been found or addressed. And so again, it's just true that sometimes they get very hyperactive because they're not getting enough good quality sleep each night. So
That's interesting. Interesting. What are some good, just general suggestions or tips to help set up our kids or even ourselves for a good night's sleep?
mhm. Yeah, so I'd say again, like I said a minute ago, making sure that you have an age appropriate schedule. That is first. I have parents come to me all the time that are like, I've tried this method, I've tried this method. And I'm like, well, without addressing the full 24-hour day, and that's everything. That's the schedule, that's the environment, all kinds of things. You may never be successful, even if you're doing your method the right way, if that makes sense. So you want to start with the basic stuff, like the schedule. I do have a schedule generator on my website on the homepage, by the way,
Oh,
that people
cool.
fill out all the time, but they just type in their information, they answer a few questions, and it generates what an age appropriate schedule would be for them. You really can't ever have an appropriate schedule without knowing how much sleep your child needs, which I feel like a lot of parents simply don't
Yeah.
know. They
Yeah,
need a lot more than parents often realize. So again, having an appropriate schedule, especially with a bedtime that's on the earlier side, because a lot of parents will keep their kids up just a little bit too late, making sure they're getting enough nap time in during the day at the right time of the day. That's something that will definitely affect the quality of sleep overnight. Like I said earlier, making sure that they're going to bed independently, that they know how to go to bed independently. If they don't, they're going to probably wake up at some point and need your help going back to sleep again, because bedtime is really the foundation for the whole night long. So that's an important one to teach them.
for sure. So with that, like, what are some signs that we can look out for, like when it may be time to change a sleep schedule? I know especially as kids get older, their daytime sleep needs kind of decrease, and sometimes that can be a challenge to kind of figure out like, oh, maybe we need to cut back or adjust where those naps or whatever are happening.
Yeah, I think it really is tricky for parents because sometimes it's not always that their schedule's inappropriate. Maybe something else is going on. Maybe they're going through a major like motor milestone or something like that that can be a little disruptive to sleep. Maybe they've got a new habit because they were sick and you used a habit while they were sick. So a lot of times that's the first thing parents will think about is, oh, well, they're not sleeping well, I must need to change their schedule, which may be true and it may be not. That's a really hard question to answer because I would say it's going to be different for each age level. So like, for example, if we're talking about, let's say like a toddler, like in the 15 to 18 month range, maybe they're really, really fighting their second nap. And then parents assume, well, they must be ready to go to one nap. But maybe the issue is that you just let them sleep too long in their first nap and you haven't started to cut that down, which is what we want to do around that age. So it's so different. And my answer would be so different. It would depend on the age of the child, I think.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Such a Sleep is just such a like multifaceted thing that you have to, it's so hard to always know like how to take in all those different factors.
And it's something that parents usually don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, I was there, like I said, I had my oldest baby who was a terrible sleeper. My problem I was having with her is she was a very alert temperament type. And so temperament can have a lot to do with how easily a baby sleeps or how hard of a time they have sleeping. And so for her, with that alert temperament, she was very good at hiding her sleepy cues until
Mm,
she was really overtired. And so my problem was I just was simply keeping her up way too long in between sleep times. And I had no idea. Of course, back then, and I'll be aging myself a little bit, but there was no Instagram or Facebook or any page
right.
you could just go follow and get sleep tips or anything. So, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. You didn't really have access to that kind of information very easily. And so, yeah, I was just keeping her up way too long. So that was my issue for sure. And I see that a lot still with parents.
Yeah. So with that, like when should parents seek out help or like reach out to you or maybe a different sleep consultant or something, but like when is the time that parents should really reach out and be like, this is beyond what I know because I only know these little bits about sleep and need some help.
Yeah. Well, I would say if they have a 6 month old or older who is not consistently sleeping through the night every single night, I mean, they may not want help and they might not be ready for help, but at that point, there is help available, if they're ready. And there's no reason for people to try to have to figure it out all on their own. If they're reading, across methods or different people's stuff, you might hear things a little bit differently, and then that gets confusing to parents. And so sometimes they'll try different things from different people, and that inconsistency actually confuses your child even more, which can make the sleep even worse. Sometimes they cry more, they wake up more when you're moving across things. Whereas, I mean, someone like me, any sleep consultant, should be able to take the information and really create a very personalized plan for them. Like I said, that's just going to take all the guesswork out of it. So I think they should reach out, if their baby's 6 months and not consistently sleeping through the night. But like I said, I've had 7, 8, 9 year olds who have never once in their life slept through the night before. And somehow those parents made
Wow.
it through, and some deal with its sleep deprivation a little bit better than But there's just absolutely no reason to struggle that long. There is a lot to know about sleep. Again, it's going to be different for each age level. And,
Hmm.
the help is out there when parents are ready. So
Definitely. That is so good that there is help out there because it's tough when you like don't get all the sleep. I know um with when my second son was born, which he's almost 8 months now, but like this last summer when he was born and like going back into that, like, oh, you're getting up every 2 hours and like not sleeping very long, it was hard. It's like, oh yeah,
and
sleep
you have
different
to expect that, like,
for
I mean, a
sure.
newborn is not going to sleep through the night. Like that's very normal. And so I have definitely parents on that end of the spectrum who are like, why is my 2-month-old not sleeping through the night? Like, what's wrong with them? My sister's baby slept through the night at this age, and sometimes babies will, but it's definitely not the norm. People have to, be ready to wake up and feed their
Yeah,
baby with little tiny tummies in the middle of the night. But it's exhausting. And for many people, it's frustrating and miserable, especially if you get to that 6, 7, 8 month mark and they're still just not sleeping well. It's hard to go that long without a full night's sleep. So,
for sure. What is kind of the norm for people to expect? I feel like I've seen so much different information on like when to expect to see your baby sleep through the night. Because some people are like, yeah, by that 3 month mark ish, you should see most of the night. And then I see other people that are like, it's totally normal, like we're biologically designed for blah blah blah. And like you should still
right.
be it's fine if you're getting up 3 or 4 times still and there are two or whatever. But
Yes. Yes. I know. And I definitely fall in the middle of that spectrum. I think what you're explaining are very extremes and
sure,
like
yeah.
they think their newborn should be sleeping through the night, but they also think these people think it's normal to wake up multiple times as a 2-year-old. And I don't think either of those things is true. From what research shows us is that when I say like a 6-month-old can sleep through the night, that typically means somewhere between 10 to 12 hours. Well, if I have a 6-month-old who I think can only go 10 hours at night, that technically isn't going to get them all the way through the night. If they need a bedtime around 7 p.m., they're going to be awake at 5, and no parent wants that. So we'll typically keep a feeding for babies that age. What research shows is that in general, by 9 months old, babies can go at least 11 hours without a feeding. And so by then, you could technically do a whole night long without even one feeding. I definitely don't think it's normal for a 2-year-old to still be waking up multiple times. I could not have worked with the thousands of families I've worked with over the last decade plus and not feel confident that every 2-year-old is capable of sleeping through the night if they're set up to be successful for that.
For
So,
sure, for sure. I know I ended up with my older, he's 6 now, and I sought out some sleep help. And actually, my friend gave me Kim West's book, the Sleep Lady book, which was so helpful for us because he wasn't sleeping through the night. And we had like it would take him like an hour to fall asleep at bedtime. Like I thought I was losing my mind because I was working like a 40-hour week job and then like my baby was not sleeping and it was such a struggle to even get him to sleep and then he would wake up all the time and I was like, I'm gonna lose my mind.
yeah,
Just
how
dealing
it
with it.
feels.
Yeah.
And see, that's how I felt at 6 months when my
Yeah.
baby still wasn't sleeping well. And I was like, I can't do this any longer. Like, so again, every parent kind of hits their wall of like no more at different points. But I'm just like, why struggle? Like there is no
Yeah.
reason to continue to struggle if you know that there's help to get you sleeping through the night. So
Yeah. I'm baffled that people at 6 are still like, oh yeah, no, it's fine that they're getting it. We can handle them getting up 3 or 4 times a night. Like, no.
and you know what? I always say like if that works for that family and that's what they want to do, obviously we all
Sure.
get to make our own choices about what we want to do for our family. But I mean, I don't think like years of like disrupted sleep is very good for anybody. But
Yeah,
if they're like, let's say co-sleeping and that's what they want to do and everyone's sleeping well, then I think that's a great thing. But if they're, not sleeping well, I think in the long run there's going to be some negative effects from
for
that.
sure.
So,
For sure.
mhm.
I know I see a lot. Um, of some reasons for like sleep regressions or reasons for babies or toddlers or whatever to start waking up more during the night if they've been sleeping good. What do you see are some common reasons for that outside of like being sick or something like that?
Yeah, or traveling would be another
Sure.
one that would
Yeah.
cause a little bump in the road. A lot of people will blame it on teething. I personally don't think teething affects sleep very much. Like maybe for a night or two, right as the tooth is like about to cut through the gum, sometimes I'll see some disruption there. But if it's an ongoing issue, it's definitely not from teething. Once it cuts through the gum, it's no longer painful anymore. So again, usually I just see that disruption for maybe like a night or two. So the big milestones, whether it's a cognitive milestone or a motor milestone, those cause changes to the brain patterns, which cause changes to your sleep patterns, and that's where we often see those regressions.
Gotcha. I had a couple people kind of submit some questions. These ones are a little
Okay.
bit more specific, but what are some tips that you have for transitioning from a crib to a bed? Like when do I know my kid's ready to do that? How's a good way to like set that up?
Mhm. So I used to say at bare minimum, I want them to be at least 2.5. And as I've done this longer, I really think the age of 3 is even better. Of course, if they've exceeded like the height, restrictions on the crib, which each crib is different, so you have to know what those are, then you may have to move them out sooner. But the longer you can keep them in that crib, I guarantee you the smoother that transition is going to go. A lot of people will move them out, when they're a newer 2-year-old or even before the age of 2. And you're usually going to have quite a bit of problems if you do that because they just don't cognitively understand what it means to stay in their bed all night or have the impulse control to actually do that if they do understand it. So it can start to make things really tricky again, even if they were sleeping, really well. The first reason you would transition them is if they have exceeded the height requirements. You may have you can, like, I've had some families who will throw like a big kid bed party or whatever, there's balloons, maybe grandma comes over, they have cookies, like tonight's the first night in your big bed. They just kind of make it a big deal. Make sure to talk to your child about what the rules of being in the big bed are. That kind of stuff can help them be successful. But I'd say the number one thing is just making sure they're old enough.
Gotcha. Somebody else asked their kind of how to handle this, that their child wakes up several times during the night and then will get out of bed. I think their kid was like 3 or 4.
Mhm.
And so they get up and then they get out of bed and so they'll go get the parents every time. So what's kind of a maybe a general suggestion for handling that?
Yeah, I could definitely give a general suggestion. This is definitely a loaded question because,
Yeah.
there'd be a lot of suggestions I would have for what we need to do to keep them in their bed. It's a little trickier to sleep train a 3 or 4-year-old than it is a baby because most of the time the habits have been going on for longer. And so they're more deeply ingrained. And anytime you have any kind of habit that's been going on longer, it's going to be harder to break, right? Like even for
Right.
a so that's a problem. And then the fact that they are mobile, so they can get up and leave if they want to, that makes it very tricky as well. Sometimes there's an issue with just boundary setting during the daytime for parents with kids this
Oh.
age. Maybe they don't have certain boundaries or consequences in place during the day. So of course, the child isn't gonna, suddenly at nighttime think there's gonna be any repercussions for getting up. But I would say most likely the child that we are speaking about does not know how to fall asleep independently at bedtime. That'd be like my number one thought. And so, of course, there's probably a parent there when they fall asleep at bedtime. And when they wake up in the night, they literally just do not know how to go back to sleep without that parent again. It's not that they miss their parent or they love their parent or they're scared or anything like that, which, all of those things could also be true. But most likely, the number one issue is that they just don't know how to fall asleep without that parent. So they need them again in the middle of the night.
What suggestions or I don't know how much dealing you've had with bedwetting during the night and that kind of affecting sleep or not.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it can. Many children are potty trained during the day for months, sometimes years before they're capable of staying dry at nighttime. So, doctors don't really see bedwetting as like a medical issue until a child is at least 6 years old. So up until that age, if they are wetting the bed, I would be putting them in like an overnight diaper, maybe an overnight pull-up. I prefer the diaper because they're more absorbent than a pull-up is made specifically to make your child feel wet and uncomfortable so they don't pee in it. So I actually like to continue the overnight diaper at night if they're not able to stay dry, which again is still normal even at the age of 5 years old. Usually we want to see them staying dry for at least 2 weeks in a row before we switch to underwear. So we don't want our children being stressed out about, we're trying to potty train or something in the middle of the night because you can't really do that. It's all related to their hormones. Is their hormone that, is connected between their brain and their bladder? Is it telling them you need to wake up, you have to go potty? It may and then their bladder size, of course, could also be an issue. They might have a tiny little bladder. And so again, normal for them to not be able to stay dry until 6 years old. At 6 years old, a lot of parents have success with some occupational therapy to, get the bedwetting to go away at that point. So that's what I would personally seek out. Of course, there are some medications that doctors may prescribe, but usually you can do like some occupational therapy and really address that once your child is 6 if needed.
Last question, where can people find you? Where can they find more information about you, reach out for help or anything like that?
Yeah, so my website's probably the best because it has all my links to like social media and everything. And that is Tulsa Pediatric Sleep Consulting.com. So people can set up a free call there. Like I said, there's the schedule generator. There's lots of free sleep resources. I have a blog on all kinds of topics, and links to my social media as well. So any of those places are great ways to find me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate your time so much again for doing this. And hopefully this was helpful for people and they will start reaching out to you if they want help.
Yes. Thanks so much, Leah.